intercontinental exchange. So oh, we'll do that from scratch here. So new chart layout, and we were looking at on the weekly chart off of the initial lows. Okay, so personally, when I chart these charts that have these big percentage moves, I always like to put these into log scale. I don't think, when you put this into linear scale, everything ends up just being sort of a blow off top here, as you can see here. If this is our, sort of initial 5-wave move here, we're way up into the stratosphere here, and not even necessarily done. Where are we here? Yeah, we're up at the 4.0 extension here. So so it really is not something that tracks super nicely when you're dealing with very, very large percent moves. But as I've showed in a couple of the other charting assignments, it's definitely something worth experimenting with in terms of playing with the log or the linear scale to see what might be a better fit for specific charts. But when we're dealing with this scale here, talking about a stock that's gone from $7 to nearly $140, that's 20x. Just the linear charts, I don't think do it any real justice. So, okay, so one quick thing that pops out here, we clearly have an uptrend in this chart, and we clearly have a bigger pullback near the front end of this here. So there's a couple ways we can look at this. We can count this as a potential wave one up. That has some potential issues here, but we could count it potentially as a wave one up, and in terms of the broad strokes, and measure the length of that, and then look at that from the completion of the correction here, of the big correction. So what does that show us here? Well, it shows us here we're up into the 1.382 region. Remember what our various zones are, so to speak, that our 1 of 3 typically targets the 0.382 to 0.618. Our 3 of 3 typically targets the 1.0 to 1.236, and our 5 of 3 typically targets the 1.382. Can see extension typical is 1.382 to 1.618, but in very strong markets we sometimes see these up at the 1.764. And keep in mind, these are just targets. There's plenty of charts even that we've done in this charts from scratch series that get quite a bit more extended off of their initial 1-2, or they have nested 1-2s that reaches far beyond these sort of standard extensions here. But these are the more standard extensions, and as we can see here, we have something that looks pretty reasonable in terms of from where we've seen consolidations here. Notice that off of this low, this looks like we have a 5-wave move into the 0.500 extension, and then we got a pullback from there. And from here, we got a deep pullback off of the 1.236 extension. So I would say overall that, this potentially looks really good for a standard Fibonacci pinball structure here. So we would label that as a 1 and a 2. And we know that we're working on our third wave. And based on reaching the 1.236, we can glean that our target for all of wave 3 should probably be up here around the 1.618. When you come up to the 1.618, the standard pullback for the wave 4 is around the 1.0, and the fifth wave should take us up to around the 2.0. So let's say that's the general sort of framework that we're working inside of here. And this is at a pretty big degree here, so I'm going to label this at the cycle degree here. So we can come in here and take a look at the subwaves on this, and you can see what do we have. So in this case, I think the actual low here is this, but occurred here. When was this? In November of 2008. But as you can see here in January, we come down. When we look at this pullback, we can see that we strike this low, and then we make this next low on what appears to be a 5-wave move, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 down. That can count as a 5 down. So I'm probably more interested in, especially given that we retraced almost 100% of this move. And also note the move off of the November 2008 low into the January high looks more corrective as a three-wave move here. I can't really get 5 waves out of it. This looks more like 3 waves up into this high and then a 5 down. So I'm going to call this the start here of, or the completion of the wave 2. And now we're looking for primary 1. Well, what do we have? So we have what looks like a little possible 5-wave up right there. We have 1, 2, 3. Let's take a look. We zoom in, see what it looks like there. Okay, we have a possible 5-wave move up, not the greatest of 5-wave moves, but could count as a little leading diagonal 1. We have a deep pullback in wave 2, and then we have an impulsive structure to the upside, a corrective pullback, and then one more high. So I would be inclined to potentially call this the top of wave 1, and this is an A, B, and C down, especially because this looks like 5 down off of this high. I don't love here that this potentially counts as 5 up, where we could have an ending diagonal for a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But just as well, we could also count this as a potential ABC up here. So let's put some labels on here. I think we have a good count this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 up. So, and where do we reach? We reached our 0.382 to 0.618 extension in 5 waves. And this is another example of like a running flat here. So we have a sharp A wave pullback, and then a B wave, and then a C wave down here. Again, we could theoretically call this an extension here in the 5 up. We could call it this way. But this looks a little bit more like 3 waves here, where we have an A, B, and C. So I'm preferring to consider this way, where we had our wave 1 up, wave 2 pullback, a wave 3, a wave 4, and then a wave 5 higher here. And that was for our primary degree wave 1. And then we have a running flat ABC here for 2. Zoom back out. Okay, so we had our initial 5 up. That's our wave 1, our wave 2 pullback, and now we're looking for our wave 3. Well, in terms of the broad strokes, what clearly looks like a wave 3 here when we're counting this thing in retrospect is that, remember, our target region for the wave 3 here is the 1.0 to 1.236. None of these pullbacks off of the 1.0 look big enough for it to be a primary 4 until we get to the March low of last year. So what really looks good is to count this as the top of our primary 3, and this is a pullback in the primary wave 4, and now working on the primary 5th wave up. So in terms of the broader strokes here, this looks pretty good. Possible we'd have to zoom into the count off of the March low of last year to see where the 1, 2 of the 5th wave projects. But the broader strokes here, this looks pretty good. We can probably fill in some of the smaller degree here as well. So off of this 1, 2, we have wave 1, we'll do this in a different color here. And what do we have here in this case here? Okay, well, it looks like we have a good 5 up into the 0.382 extension off of this low. Then we have a clearly corrective wave 2 pullback. Oh. So this is sort of interesting here. We have 5 waves up into the 0.382 extension off of the primary 1-2. We have a clearly corrective pullback here into this wave 2 low. And then we have some kind of choppy action here where this potentially counts as another 1-2 here. And even here, we have another potential 1-2. And even here, again, another 1-2. We don't typically count so many 1-2s, but this is sort of interesting here in this case. Notice here, when we count out the 1-2s, we're only at this degree here, which suggests that this would be the top of this third wave. Pull back in a fourth. Then we have 5 up here. Let's see how that tracks. Okay, so we have our 1 of 3 at the 0.382 extension. And now we have a big extension here with all these 1-2s where our 1.0 was just our 3 of 3 of 3. This is sort of an interesting count here. It does work, and it's definitely sort of tricky at the micro degree here with all these, sort of nested 1-2s here because otherwise, if we don't count it this way, if we were counting it like I was doing before, let's say I clear all this off and just do the broad strokes. This also sort of works in a way, but I don't necessarily think it's as accurate. Keep in mind here, we have 5 waves up to the 0.382. That's our 1 of 3. Our target then for the 3 of 3 is the 1.0. We hit that and then pulled back. The problem here is then in that case is that this is a massive wave 5 relative to wave 1 through 3, both in time and in price. Consider that wave 5 is quite a bit bigger than the rest of 1 through 3 here. So it's a little bit more of an extension that I think is reasonable, which is why I went through that exercise of showing all the various degrees. Yeah, in this case, the wave 5 is in excess of, is greater in length than waves 1 through 3, which I'm not terribly keen on that. And so in that case, again, I would come back here and count it as shown before, again, where we have 5 up. Here, I'll count this from the inside out. So we have I think this is right. 1, 2. Even this makes a little bit more sense here where, let's see, off of this low. Yeah, this makes actually some sense here. And then this could count as the fourth wave. Even that looks a little bit better there, that point there where our 5 of 3, again, our 1 of 3 hit the 1.0, and this is 5 waves up here. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, yeah. And we just got a big extension in this 5 of 3. That works a little bit better. Or you could count it the other way here where I even had it like this. I think both of these potentially work. But this is such a small fourth wave of this at this intermediate degree. I probably am more inclined to count it this way, that I think works best here, where we had the big 5 of 3 rather than just this really tiny fourth and this tiny fifth then. So that count works pretty good. And in terms of looking at the count off the off of the 2020 low, we can see here this possibility. We have a wave 1, actually this counts maybe better as the wave 1 here. So let's see, this is our wave 1, 2, and look where that takes us. The 1.764 here is almost perfect confluence with the much larger degree, with the cycle degree 1.618 targets. That's pretty interesting. And it's possible here that we're taking shape as a diagonal here. I want to note that possibility here where we have our 1, 2, and then this looks like 3 waves up here into the 0.618. Possible we could count that as 5 up and now starting a bigger third, but also possible that we have an A there and a B and are working on a C up. Seems to work reasonably well. Can also potentially look at this as the 1, 2 here. See what that suggests. Okay, so we have 5 up as the A wave there. Yeah, this potentially works too also. Has less good confluence though, certainly. But definitely possible here. But look good for heading up to at least the 190 region here. In either way we look at this, I think I'm more inclined to count this as the initial wave 1 here though into the June high, to look at it this way. And this actually aligns with some of the index charts here. So that would be suggestive of getting another high in 3, pulling, pulling back in 4, and then getting a 5th wave up here. So zooming back out, that appears to be a good count from scratch on the Intercontinental Exchange. I want to just point one other thing out that someone showed in the charting assignment here. We'll actually do this, from scratch again here, but just I want to show something quickly. Someone asked initially why we wouldn't count this as a diagonal up, and they pointed out the following here, that our initial move here can potentially count as a 3-wave move where we have an A, B, and C. Off of this, it's clear that we only reached the 1.382 extension, which is a little bit more characteristic of an ABC than a 5-wave move. And if we're to count that as an ABC, we're still looking at a bigger, 1-2 setup there. My issue with that is that this is so strongly trending upwards that it's not very suggestive of a diagonal here. In terms of what we would have wanted to see would have been a 1-2. This would have been okay as a 3rd, but I would have wanted to see price come back down here in a 4th and then head up in a 5th. And we could have counted it something like this, where, even though this is very trending, we have an A wave up to the 0.764, that's our typical target, and then perhaps a very small B wave and then a C wave. And that helps us deal with this issue of the strange proportions here. But in this case, very difficult to look at it this way in terms of this being all of 4 and this being a diagonal. It's really just sort of too small. And so, for that reason, even though this initial move here, I think does reasonably count as an ABC, I think that is a fair perspective of it, though. I am more inclined to consider this as 5 waves for just a standard impulse wave 1. It doesn't break the rules of a standard impulse wave 1. For example, we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I mean, that's a totally valid count there. It's not a typical impulse in that, our 3 reached a reasonable extension. We had a very shallow 4th wave flat, and then we got a 5th wave up here, but a very muted 5th wave at that. But definitely more inclined to, given the larger degree structure, to count it, showing here as the impulsive count, and nearing a larger top. Not so close, but let's say in the next year or two, nearing a top for the primary 5 of intermediate 3. And again, when we take all the fibs, the smaller degree off, you can see here that, again, our typical target when our wave 3 reaches the 1.236 is the 1.618, and that's what we're targeting, based on the smaller degree as well. It has very nice confluence, and so like this chart quite a bit, in terms of it being exemplary of a really good impulse, and now getting, potentially an ending diagonal primary 5 of cycle 3 here. So, and that's how you do that chart from scratch. So thank you everybody for attending. That's going to be it for today. I see a couple more chart requests, but committed to, to the tech team that I would keep these videos down to, roughly about an hour. Otherwise they just have, some problems with resolution and rendering and all the rest of it and such. But for those of you who have questions about anything remaining, I know I do tend to cover a couple more things in the beginner circle. So if you want to ask those in the beginner circle, I'd be happy to, share a couple of charts there, just from sort of more the usual suspects. If you want to ask about metals or even Bitcoin, I'd be happy to share those over there, but we'll probably get to those tomorrow. So anyway, thank you everybody for attending, and good luck in your trading for the rest of the week. Thanks.